Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Jeremiah Wells to defeat Carlston Harris. And I'm here to recap UFC on ESPN 50 or whatever the fuck. And I'm going to start at the top. Sandhagen and Font. This was maybe not the greatest fight, of course, really wasn't, but it was a great performance from Corey Sandhagen. He really impressed me by going the grappling route, and he was able to sustain a wrestling and grappling game plan for 25 minutes. I think he definitely leveled up in the last few months training for Umar Nurmagomedov. Definitely leveled up in the wrestling department, and it was the easiest path to victory against Rob Font, and he took it. I thought Corey would have done well on the feet, but of course Rob Font has that game-changing power, so Corey really had to mind his P's and Q's, and he said, fuck it. I can keep taking this guy down easily, and he was smothering him from on top. So he just kept going. And for Rob Font, he was dominated, but of course he took this fight on short notice, much like Corey did. Faced a major curveball, and that was going into a matchup which I think Corey was a bad stylistic matchup anyway, with full camps and full health and whatever. But Rob Font was really up against it here, and he was sound jiu-jitsu-wise, kept himself safe, didn't give up any big moments really, but he was still dominated by and large. So, really tough loss for him. And for Corey Sandhagen, again, this was a 25-minute fight that was one-sided with no real big moments. On paper, that sucks. And as a fight, it did kind of suck, to be honest. But I'm still very impressed with Corey Sandhagen. He's just that much more interesting as a contender. And assuming he fights, Aljamain Sterling, or it could be Sean O'Malley or fucking Marab or whoever, but he's going to be a much more serious contender now that I have much more appreciation for his wrestling. He's always had wrestling here, but again, he's been sharpening those skills over the last few months, and he looked like fucking Marab in this fight here. So, great win for Corey Sandhagen, and for Rob Font, thanks for stepping up and saving the card, Rob Font. But yeah, this was a pretty tough fight. That brings us to Tatiana Suarez versus Jessica Andrade. This was another dominant victory. Tatiana Suarez pretty much steamrolled Jessica. She took her down, had a great controlling round in round one, but wasn't able to get her out of there. And then in round two, it was much of the same until she caught her neck. Tatiana Suarez has an incredible choke game, from the front headlock. She can hit you with anything, the Darce, the Anaconda, the guillotine, and that's how she got Jessica Andrade. Worked her way to the guillotine and just sat on it, and Andrade was just in too tight. She was resisting for a little bit and then had to tap. Sucks for Jessica Andrade. She's lost a lot lately. She's on a bad losing streak here. And even though this is another fighter, Tatiana Suarez, who will be fighting for a title, Andrade has only lost to really, really good fighters. But still, a lot of losses as of late. And this is definitely this is a big one. This takes her down a peg or two, and yeah, she looks as vulnerable as ever, and she's a little less respected altogether. Let's just be blunt about it. But Tatiana Suarez, she's a girl now that's beaten three world champions and finished all of them. Andrade, Alexa Grasso, and Carla Esparza. She probably could have been a champion already, but she will be fighting for a title soon enough. That's my prediction. Maybe not next, but that's just because she's lost momentum through inactivity. But the sky's the limit with Tatiana Suarez. Brings us to Dustin Jacoby versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. This sucked for Kennedy. This was just, it was over in like a minute. He just ate a right hand. I can't even say it was a big right hand, but it was an accurate right hand, and it sat him down. Kennedy, even though it's only been once that he was knocked out, he's definitely vulnerable. We've seen him hurt on multiple occasions, and this is just another one. Dustin Jacoby was too big for his big moment to not nearly put Kennedy out. And once he heard him, he pounced on him. And you could even say the stoppage was a little premature, but it was just a hammer fist away from being okay in everybody's book. Dustin Jacoby gets a first-round TKO. This guy needed a big victory here because he had lost 2 consecutive fights to Murzakanov and Khalil Roundtree. And he got a big win and got it in emphatic fashion. Second guy to TKO Kennedy Nzechukwu. Dustin Jacoby moves up. Kennedy Nzechukwu still got a lot of great traits as a fighter, but one of his bad traits is vulnerability, durability, lack thereof. And moving forward, yeah, you'll hear me doubt his durability anytime I talk about him. But yeah, great fight. That brings us to Diego Lopes versus Gavin Tucker. Diego Lopes was all over Gavin Tucker. Well, he kicked him in the balls first, and then they had a break for a few minutes. But then once they resumed, it was over very quickly. Gavin took him down, and before he even took him down, Diego was going for the triangle. You know, some people call that a flying triangle. I don't fucking think so, but whatever. He locked up the triangle on the way down, and that was that. I mean, it was an armbar, technically, triangle armbar that finished him. But yeah, he had that locked up on the way down, and then just cinched it tighter and tighter over the next few seconds. And yeah, got a great big victory, Diego Lopes. He's a guy who showed a lot of promise in defeat in his debut, and now steamrolls Gavin Tucker, who had a lot going against him. You know, with all the context, this win kind of makes sense. But Gavin Tucker's still a guy that's beaten some very good fighters, like Billy Quarantillo, and dominated him. So Diego Lopes gets his first win in the UFC, does so in a minute or so, and with a beautiful triangle armbar. He's awesome. I love Diego Lopes, and I'm glad he gets a win because I want to see him fight a lot of guys in the UFC. And for Gavin Tucker, this was a tough loss, no doubt about it. He was off for a while. He's now 37 years old, and he's coming off 2 losses, both inside a minute now. So, or, you know, this one might have been a little over a minute, but whatever. It's all about the same. It hasn't been so good for Gavin Tucker as of late, and I'd say this loss is pivotal, although it remains to be seen where he goes. That brings us to Tanner Boser versus Alexa Camur. Tanner Boser was just better, faster, better energy. He was more effective at range, and he was the bigger, stronger guy, too, which helped him out in the physicality department when they were tied up. Alexa Camur is very tough. He's got a good chin and a decent work rate, but he's not the greatest fighter. He's not the greatest fighter, not the biggest fighter. And yeah, he's been a step behind in every UFC fight of his. This was his first fight in a while because he'd been off for 2 years or whatever, but not the most inspiring return. So, shit loss for him, and for Tanner Boser, good bounce back victory here. Brings us to Ludovic Klein versus Ignacio Bahamondes. This was a dominant victory, I thought, for Ludovic Klein, although whatever. Every fight that's dominant is kind of close in some ways, but Ludovic Klein was the faster, sharper striker on the feet. He hurt him. He didn't knock down Ignacio, but he hurt him and got him down. And then it was just Ludovic Klein being much stronger on the inside. He won the physicality battle once they were inside. He was faster on the outside, and on the inside he was stronger. So he was doing a lot of grappling in this fight, getting Bahamondes down and controlling him. And on the feet, you know, Bahamondes is a very diverse striker, but he was up against a very fast, sharp striker here. And I thought Klein's technique, you know, won the stand-up battle. So Klein with a very solid victory, looked really good here. And for Bahamondes, this was a very difficult matchup, I think. You know, he was expected to win, but he's a guy that can shine when he's not fighting someone who is that sharp and athletic. So, tough loss for Bahamondes. He's got a lot of work to do. And for Ludovic Klein, he looked really, really good here. Incredible. That brings us to Kyler Phillips versus Raoni Barcelos. Raoni Barcelos impressed me in a lot of ways. His durability, and that I thought he was hurt a few times, he was dropped, but also in the fact that he worked hard in round 3. I thought he was starting to take over that fight, winning the volume battle. But Kyler Phillips definitely got the better of him in this fight. He was sharper. He just looked like the younger guy, younger, faster, and more dangerous. And I thought, even without the danger, I thought he was winning the striking battle. He was doing a really good job and taking away Barcelos' wrestling. I thought his get-ups were the story there, the main difference. But he just outworked Raoni Barcelos over the course of 15 minutes. I did like that Barcelos was the last man standing. Helps alleviate some doubts of his that I've had. Some doubts in him. Some doubts of mine, I should say. But he's only going to be older in his next fight and whatever. So, yeah, he had a lot going against him, will in the future. But Kyler Phillips, he's got a lot going for him. And he's got a bright future, no doubt about it. This was a solid victory. And even though he wasn't able to put Raoni Barcelos away, he showed some danger and showed he could hang in there when the tide was starting to turn in the end a little bit. Although it's not like Barcelos had him on the ropes, but I thought he was starting to take over. And that brings us to Jeremiah Wells losing to Carlston Harris. This was a very great comeback victory for Carlston Harris. I thought it was a dominant win for Wells before that. He was on his way to a dominant victory. Once he got him down in round 3, I said, all right, I know how this one goes. And nope, Carlston Harris snuck in that Anaconda choke, which is his second finish in the UFC, and he got that one right before it over the guy Sagid. He's got a great Anaconda choke, and here he showed that he's always dangerous with it. He was down 20-18 on everybody's scorecard, just being dominated and up against a physical monster where he couldn't really get off. And he kept himself in the fight, found an opportunity, and once he laced up that Anaconda, he's got a killer grip. And I think that's far and away his best submission, and it came through for him in a big, big way. He still only has the one loss in the UFC to Shavkat, but everybody else he's found a way to beat. And this one was really one where he had to find a way. So he showed a lot in this fight and looked, I can't say he looked incredible, but, it's an incredible victory. And for Jeremiah Wells, this was tough because he looked really good. He looked really, really good, and he got to show everybody his wrestling again. And when he's up against somebody who, presents a certain danger, he's always got that in his back pocket, Jeremiah Wells. I mean, he's probably got the more dangerous strike on the feet, but if there's any doubts about the stand-up at all, Jeremiah Wells is a very good wrestler. But here, he just ran into a guy that's got a killer choke to counter a sloppy takedown, and he found the victory, Carlston Harris. Great fucking win. And for Jeremiah Wells, I still think a lot of him, but yeah, now he's no longer perfect in the UFC. That brings us to Billy Quarantillo versus Damon Jackson. This was a very good fight. Damon Jackson was doing very well early on. I thought he had a distinct striking advantage, and he had 1 inch of reach and whatever, but Damon showed no fear. And he's a guy that his primary weakness will always be his chin. But he showed no fear here, was throwing down, hurting Billy, roughing him up, out-wrestling him, doing really, really well early on. But Billy Quarantillo is Billy Quarantillo. That guy has some of the best cardio in the sport. He's one of those guys who is a reliable third-round fighter. And here he came through with a big third round, and he won the fight. I did bet on him. I said in my pre-fight that I wasn't going to bet on him winning in round 3 because it was at plus 500. Well, come fight night, it was at plus 1,000. And even though the bet didn't hit, I am still proud. I'm happy to have bet on that. I will never not bet on Billy Quarantillo in round 3, unless it is like plus 500 or whatever. But he is just, it's what won him the fight. He didn't get the finish, but his cardio was the story here. He took over, started ripping Damon Jackson down low, up high. And, of course, down low is really what helped him take over the fight. But yeah, Billy's got relentless cardio and very good kickboxing. And of course, decent jiu-jitsu as well. And he was just the last man standing in this fight. Took over, and Damon Jackson, to his credit, he hung in there and he made it pretty close in the end. He was throwing down. Damon was really going for it in round 3, but he was just outgunned. And Billy Quarantillo, man, if you're standing across the cage from that guy in round 3, more often than not, you're fucked. You got to hug him and slow him down because he's a problem. So, excellent win for Billy. Fucking loved it. And for Damon Jackson, it was a close fight, a war, but yeah, he was not the last man standing. Cody Durden beats Jake Hadley. This was a very, very entertaining fight. Very entertaining. Jake Hadley had that armbar deep in round 2. It was just incredible. That was one of the tightest submissions that didn't get a tap that I've ever seen. Ever. Check out Sene Kakuta versus Alexander Otsuka, round 3, in Pride. But this one was incredibly tight. And Cody Durden, aside from that armbar, he was largely dominant in my opinion. I thought he looked incredible on the feet. His right hand was finding the chin and the body all night. He looked really, really good at range, busting Jake up and he took over that fight immediately, grabbed the bull by the horns and was all over him. But the wrestling was always there for him as well. He had a pretty much dominant wrestling over Jake Hadley. Jake did hit a reversal, and that's how he ended up in the armbar in round 2. But wrestling was all Cody Durden here, and it was a hard fight. He was in a lot of danger, but he looked really good, at a much better work rate, and I do think he was overall the sharper fighter. Jake Hadley, I think a lot of him, and moving forward, I think he's going to kick some ass, but Cody Durden, he's been underrated for some time, and I think his days of being underrated are over. By the way, this should have gotten fight of the night. There was no fight of the night. This was fucking amazing. This fight was incredible. Slowed down a little bit in the end, I guess. But, yeah, that was a real war. I thought that should have been fight of the night. And also, Jake had a good guillotine to end round 1, but it was too little too late because Cody was heavy on top and busted him up on the feet. So, yeah, great win for Cody Durden. Tough loss for Jake Hadley. Speaking of tough losses, Buzukja, but Matt Serra calls him Buzukja, so I'll call him Buzukja. Buzukja was outgunned here by Sean Woodson. Sean Woodson did make a point of mixing up the grappling. I thought he really made a strong point of doing that, especially when he started grappling after he hurt Buzukja on the feet. But Woodson, he's got that great combination boxing. He's got the rangy kicks, of course, because he's got 10 inches of reach on most opponents. But he's got, that's his primary strength, his boxing. When he gets you against the cage and he's ripping body shots. And he was doing that to Dennis multiple times in this fight. Dennis hung tough. And, of course, he had some good scares in him with a big, powerful right hand. But Sean was all over him. Was all over Dennis. And made a point of out-grappling him. Had him in a few very close chokes, working the guillotine, Doris Anaconda, submissions he should have in his arsenal considering his frame. And he put a lot of good work in on the ground against Dennis. And he wasn't able to get the finish. Dennis has never been finished. But Sean Woodson came close, and I thought, he did exploit a bit of a cardio advantage over the guy that took the fight on a few days' notice. So he did what he should have done. But very impressive to see him grapple. Kind of like I said about Sandhagen. Just very impressive for Sean Woodson to grapple. And for Dennis Buzukja, we will see him again. He showed a lot in this fight. Showed more than anything his toughness and also cardio and everything, hanging out to the final bell. But overall, he was pretty much outgunned here, and this was a very difficult matchup. I think it would have been a difficult matchup on a full camp. But, yeah, like this, very tough circumstances, and he made it to the final bell. So, credit to him. That brings us to the first fight of the evening. Asu Almabaev versus Ode Osbourne. Ode Osbourne just couldn't get going here. He had decent takedown defense, but not great. He was taken down with a single leg early on, Almabaev's signature single. Like I said, he's like Daniel Cormier, just wants to snatch a leg and toss the guy up in the air like a pizza. I don't think he tossed O'Day, but he got him down with the single leg. And then O'Day seemed a little wise to that and was, had a better sprawl, letting him get in on his legs. But in the second round, Almabaev didn't give a shit. He shot in, came up for a body lock as O'Day sprawled, and then tripped him to the ground immediately. And then from there, it was pretty methodical, but he won the way he had won in most of his submission victories and his overall MMA fights. He wins by rear naked choke. That's how this guy fights. He's got smothering top control and really good passing and a great back take and a great rear naked choke. And O'Day Osbourne, even though he's been submitted twice, they were to opportunistic submissions. Brian Kelleher with a guillotine, and this guy Jose Calvo knee barred him in like 24 seconds. But this was a methodical submission. Almabaev got him down and controlled him and slowly but surely strangled him. Great win for Almabaev. He is a welcome addition to the UFC roster. I hope this guy has a quick turnaround and gets back in there. I mean, he's young and the sky's the limit. But yeah, he didn't take too much damage and he looked awesome here. Really, really good. And for O'Day Osbourne, he's definitely a vulnerable guy. Got a lot of, weaknesses altogether. But he's still a capable fighter. And he's had some solid victories as of late. He'll be back in the UFC. I don't think this is it for him. But yeah, great fucking event altogether. Main event slowed down a bit, but still fascinating in its own way. And yeah, another one in the books. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.